all out this year. Exactly. They're all out. Hello. Hey, Mary Beth. Right. But as we keep going through all of the difficult economic times, one of the things that we've been really all good at together is working through the issues as coming from whether it's from the Municipal Officials Association and working together to try to identify issues. We got a nice list from Ann Janiak on the things that you all had some concerns and questions about, so we want to try to do is kind of move quickly through that part and certainly get to the place where we have specific items coming up. We have some legislators that are going to have points of discussion. So let's do this is just really quickly go around the room, and then we'll get started and have our address and comments from County Executive Rob Astorino. All right? So, County Executive.
Good to have everybody here. I like the dialogue. There's issues that, there's some individual issues here that affect little areas, specific areas, or specific municipalities. I think one of the things that we've got to really concentrate on is we all battle with the same issue of these mandates and pensions, is we've got to really start picking our battles and going in with a unified voice. And that's something that's, I think, real critical to each and every one of us. And there are a lot of things that we can march together on, and I think those are things we really got to start focusing on if we're ever going to get anywhere with Albany. We were up there recently, meeting with some of the state delegation, and to their credit, they were very honest. You're not going to get any help. And so, the big stuff they're just not tackling. There's no political will for them, and they're grappling with their own issues. But as you know, most of our cost drivers are from lovely Albany. So unless and until we're all sort of all willing to grab the third rail on these big issues, it's not going away. And I think there's some partnerships that we can have with schools on issues like this that are facing the same kind of issues. So I know there's a lot of specific stuff in here that deals with specific areas of the county, but I think on the 30,000-foot view, we've got to sort of hold hands and deal with, in one voice, issues that we can, and that would be pensions and WIC and those kind of things, even Triborough, which obviously I've been talking about. But a lot of this stuff isn't Democrat, Republican anymore. We're all in on this. So those are some of the things I would prefer to concentrate on, because it affects every one of us.
Thanks, Rob. So if we could, Mayor, if you would just go around, just quickly introduce yourselves, because everyone does know everyone, but still just Mayor.
Mayor Foster, Mayor City Peekskill.
Mayor Steve Eklund from Tuckahoe.
Harry Poor, Village Administrator, Bronxville.
Chuck Strom, City Manager, New Rochelle.
Chuck Lesnick, City Council President, Yonkers.
Joan Mayberry, Town Supervisor, Town of Mount Pleasant.
Tom Roots, Mayor, White Plains.
Peter DePaola, Town of Pelham Supervisor.
Dennis Pillett, Mayor of Portchester.
Norm Rosenblum, Mayor, Village of Mamaroneck.
Peter Shearer, Mayor of Pleasantville.
Nancy Seligson, Supervisor of the Town of Mamaroneck.
Bill Hanauer, Mayor of Albany.
Lee Roberts, Supervisor of Bedford.
Alfreda Williams, County Legislator. Susan Carpenter, Supervisor, Newcastle.
Drew Fixell, Mayor of Tarrytown.
Judy Myers, County Legislator.
MaryJane Shimsky, County Legislator.
Lyndon Williams, County Legislator.
Pete Harckham, County Legislator.
Michael Gray, Supervisor, County Workout.
William Grace, the partner of the supervisor.
Ann Janiak, Westchester Municipal Officials Association.
Gary Warshower, County Supervisor.
Joe Corbin, Town of Supervisor.
Mary Murphy, Summer Supervisor.
Come on, Chief of Staff, come on.
George
And a liaison for most of us. So again, thanks so much. We have plenty of folks that are around from the Board of Legislators that are here. Certainly going to thank them just in the beginning, because these things never happen alone. Between Ann Janiak's meeting with and talking with Tara Martin and Lala Curtin and Diana Walken and the folks that are in there stapling and copying and all that other kind of things to make sure that things happen for us. We want to thank them as well. So what we want to do is just jump in through some of the presentations. We're going to try to keep them. We ask people, and it's hard. Oh, welcome. Come on in and get some food, right? Sure. Peter. Just give a quick introduction to yourself, Super.
An introduction myself?
That's it.
So, my name's Peter Parsons, and I wandered down here from the barren northern wastes of Lewisburg.
Wow.
Where I am the supervisor.
Okay. Wow.
I represent those parents.
All right, so I guess what we're going to do is we'll start with the Vice Chair of the Board, Lyndon Williams, talking and give us a quick update on what we're doing with shared services as we've been working together
Sure.
in the county.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. I was asked to talk briefly with you about the work we're doing through the Board of Legislators Committee on Government Reforms and Efficiencies, dealing with shared services. Let me go to the first slide. We have a few slides here, but I think that many of you are aware that our county has been designated the highest property tax county in the nation, and that has been somewhat of a matter that's been out there, although, in my opinion, it was pursuant to a study that the Tax Foundation in Washington, D.C. had done. But the study aggregated all the taxes from all over the county and compare them to all the taxes from all over the counties of different municipalities throughout the country. And on that aggregation basis, Westchester County has been designated the highest tax county. But we know for a fact that it was not a county versus a county comparison, so the comparison is somewhat distorted. However, we are aware that the greatest portion, why don't you move to the next slide, that what does this mean? It means that Westchester County has to do a lot to try to work in a cooperative way with our municipalities as well as school districts in order to try to gain efficiencies and bring down the cost of government to everyone. The school districts, for instance, in the most cases, you'll notice, have about 63% of the tax bill for most taxpayers. And many of us, except Yonkers who are here, have really no control over what the school district does, because the school district is an independent taxing jurisdiction. But what we can do is that we have been focusing on trying to find ways of which we can encourage and assist in helping to bring that cost down through shared services. And it is always difficult to do that because trying to have work through shared services, there's a feeling that municipalities or governments have to give up something in terms of authority. So we have chosen to look at areas where we believe that there can be some efficiencies without having to deal with the situation of persons feeling that they're going to lose authority over their municipalities. Let me go to the next slide, which is a graph that really shows a bar graph that shows the divergence in the different tax jurisdictions. As you can see, the school taxes run roughly somewhere above approximately 63% if you were to average them out. These are the major cities, major cities like Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, White Plains, and Yonkers. But it really, these graphs, if you were to compare this throughout the county, is probably going to run about the same way. And the county taxes run approximately, depending upon where you are, about 15% to 20%, and the municipal taxes run approximately about 20, somewhere above there, just about balance of it. But clearly, what this says is that if we're not able to try to effectuate school taxes by trying to assist in bringing down costs, we're really not talking about doing any kind of relief for taxpayers in Westchester County that's going to be meaningful. And so that is the reason why we have chosen to kind of focus on shared services. And let me talk about shared service. We're talking about efficiencies. How do you do things differently at a lower cost? How do we reduce costs, improve delivery of services? New York State law allows us to do it under Article, I think, 5G of the General Municipal Law. But we haven't really, I don't think many of our municipalities have actually taken advantage of this, because shared services have really became a more recent discussion than one that is that's been wide-based. In addition, New York State, the state of New York, is actually taken on to encourage this. Back in 2005-2006 budget, the state appropriated about $2.75 million toward grants that assist municipalities in sharing services. The recent budget of Governor Cuomo, I think that number is up to like $35 million. So it seems to be going in the right direction. Now, in terms of how, this is a competitive process, and we haven't, I don't think the county has actually participated so far, but that's something I think municipalities really should be looking at participating in if we're going to be able to assist in putting together models of which we can share services on. The committee that I chair, the Government Reform Committee, started to look at shared services in the IT area and in information technology. And the reason why we have done that is that we find that those services are more scalable, and that some of the services are purchased from outside vendors and others are internally performed. Equipment is purchased from outside vendors, and so clearly there is, I would say, low-hanging fruit there that can be accomplished if municipalities and the county are working closer together. And these are examples of how we can save money, looking at some of the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure that the county has that can be useful in. And I know the County of West is we're already doing this in some areas, but there needs to be kind of a broader scale, broader approach to making sure that many more municipalities are participating. And I know the county executive is very much supportive of having that occur within those departments. And the final slide that I think we wanted to get to, this is that we're going to be proposing legislation soon through the committee to really kind of formalize this, and to really look at how we can formalize having a kind of a master IT agreement that actually municipalities can sign on to, and working closely with municipalities to get this up and running. We've also started to do this from a bottom-up approach, where we have local community-based organizations who have been involved with our committee, and who you're probably going to see coming around visiting you, different municipalities. I know New Rochelle was involved with discussions on this, Mount Vernon was, and I know White Plains, I think the Westchester Homeowners Coalition has actually been taking this up as somewhat of an obligation that they want to really kind of help make work. And so they're going to be coming to different municipalities to talk about how it is that services can be shared. And we're looking at moving a bill forward. So I think that has capsulized my time frame. I think I'm within the 5 minutes they gave me to do this.
Very good.
And we can move on.
Did you have questions and answers?
Yeah.
If you have questions just on that would be absolute. And again, Lyndon just talked about it. Certainly, Chief of Staff Aros has been a lead for trying to help do this with shared services under the direction of the county executive, to make sure that we have these other opportunities. So we should always looking to try to formalize things in process in the law, to make sure that we have a roadmap that everyone can follow.
So when he was county legislator, Marty Rogowski made a presentation to WMOA about joint purchases of streetlights. And he was looking for some economy of scale to get 50,000. Yonkers is about to do 12,000 in the next couple of weeks. What happened to that initiative, and
I can comment on that. Marty and I met with NYSERDA toward the end of Marty's, not NYSERDA, NYPA, excuse me, toward the end of on that exact thing, because I know there were some towns in the north that weren't interested, as were NWIAC and SWIAC. So that really does give you countywide economies of scale. We're waiting for them to come back to us with numbers. So I'll follow up with them, because you're the second person who's raised that issue recently.
This is more of a philosophical question, how you move forward. I think it's a given that we're all in agreement that we're looking to save money and time with shared services and consolidation. There are prime examples. We have Joe Carbon, who's leading the effort to fire himself. But my concern is, and I'll use two examples. as County Executive Astorino noted, we really have to work together to have any kind of power. And we're all into it. It's an apolitical situation. As an example, how do we go about working together for permit processing? So it would expedite things on a pragmatic level. If there's a flood mitigation, how do we work with the county? Because quite honestly, like everything else, not be facetious, everything is dumped down to lower counties and so on. How do we work with that? And that's basically the situation I'm looking at, is how do we work together to expedite the permit processing?
I think Legislator Shimsky is going to address that
in
in her remarks.
But, so we'll definitely get to that, but there is obviously a process that we're trying to formulate together. So when I steals legislation, he's thunder on that. But we did pass jointly, by the way, again, working through a process for stormwater action. So we'll get some more information on how that would work and how people feed into that process.
And one other example, just to use it, and it's not only just the Westchester Joint Waterworks. The Westchester Joint Waterworks, obviously, which is Harrison, the Village of Mamaroneck, the Town of Mamaroneck, is working with the county. But it seems that the feds and the state have this method of divide and conquer. And we're all looking at these tremendous, this big hammer of fines and everything else. How do we get together? Because what happens with the Westchester Joint Waterworks, quite honestly, and what New York City does, where we buy all the water from, is going to affect not only us, it's going to affect New Rochelle, D-Yonkers, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, and so on. So again, I think, go back to without a long dissertation, we have to work together on this, or we're all going to get nailed individually.
But, Dennis, I'm sorry. Dennis, go.
Yeah, thanks. Related to shared services, I think this is a great idea, and I know like the county typically doesn't like to do it from above.
Right.
But there's three basic areas where this makes sense, right? One is the area that you guys are focusing on, which is copy services and email systems. But the real opportunities for us, I think, are in sharing applications like accounts payable and back office. I mean, professionally, I set up shops for GE, Citibank, Pepsi, where they have one shop for the whole continent, right? So the scale is here for us to do that. As a village person who would be interested in buying into that type of a utility, you could think of it, we need to understand, pricing and the continuity of the operation. I'm going to send all my accountants home. How do I know you guys are going to continually fund this? So really, obviously it's going to come from participating municipalities. So I don't know if you guys are having discussions where, like, the different levels of government are focusing at that lower level to kind of formulate what and price and things. Marguerite's a great person, by the way. The CIO, Marguerite Vernon. She and I've had a number of discussions. The other opportunity is consulting, if you will. When I worked at PepsiCo, they had all the divisions, Frito-Lay and Pizza Hut and everything, and we had a SWAT team of computer consultants that they would airdrop in to the different divisions. Could be different towns or cities or villages. And there was such consistency in whether it was mobile satellite technology on top of the restaurants or the delivery trucks, that they were able to leverage and economize the scale. As a village, we can't afford an IT department, but it's highly specialized stuff. You have 110 people already work here. Maybe if you added 4 more that we all paid for, you get a lot of yardage. You're in the right direction.
And that's exactly, I think, why we focused on this area for the exact reasons that you're talking about, because this, it has happened in non-governmental environment and successful.
25 years.
Yes, exactly.
Peter, then Mayor.
I just want to pile on to that. We're one of the 7 municipalities that uses the county email service, for example, and although that's an asset to us because we have no in-house IT, it's legacy software 2, maybe 3 generations behind. And it's funny, so I have that email address as well as email addresses with clients in my day job using much more advanced software. And so the product that's being offered is convenient, but it's getting increasingly behind the curve. So a company of our size in the private sector would never buy the services that are offered. We only buy it because we have no other cost-effective way of getting it. I add to that, I had an interesting conversation with a citizen in Pleasantville who's working with the school district on a sort of citizen budget committee. He's identified, and I can't vouch for his numbers, that the BOCES deal they have for T1 services is about double the free market rate. So, you know, you end up with a new kind of closed shop, and we just have to be careful about that. You know, it's pretty tough to have a lean and mean competitive operation inside the world of government with competitive bidding and open requirements and all that kind of stuff. But you know, the reality is these services are convenient and sort of the least bad option we have available to us. And if there's a way we can up our game, I think for the previous comments, it creates a real critical mass. I mean, an email is just
and we were just chatting again in the budget this year, and one of the things again, Rob presented in the budget the IT investment to increase some of the things that we have to do in IT, and certainly that was adopted by the board. So we're getting there. So we're getting into the
Right, just following up on the questions or the comments around IT, we do use LightPath, the county service, but through a grant that we had gotten from Senator Schumer's office, we have just finished installing a citywide Wi-Fi, which will be used for municipal purposes, and we're now talking with the school district about the availability of bandwidth for them. And the challenge becomes this. I mean, our piece got funded under a grant, and so it wasn't a cost to the taxpayer. The language in here requiring the county's IT department, to enter into IMAs, will it come with it the skill set to help school districts and others actually move to a wireless environment? It is the only really productive way to carry out municipal operations, where everybody you have in the field, whether it's public safety, whether it's your inspectors, parks people, etc., have continuous access to data that they need and transmitting information to City Hall, and be able to work with the school districts. Because one of the challenges we have found is the school districts are bound to some BOCES arrangements. They have their own set of union challenges in front of them. But really like to understand how flexible the county's IT department can be, and whether or not you actually are, in following up with Mayor Pilla's comments, really moving into the world of virtual data storage and shared services. So if communities that are all on the most recent version of KBS actually want to think about a cloud computing environment,
Right, exactly.
Would the county be there to support us, or are we dealing with 2 decades old technology?
You see, that's what I don't see this working unless the county is going to, as you said, today's environment, because no one would want to participate on technology that is 2 or 3 years old.
Right.
And that's why, and the economies of scale are achieved because you're able to do this together rather than individually a municipality trying to get the technology up to date at its own cost.
Right.
And so I think clearly there is an approach, and that's what we have spoken to. All right, you have a pretty good IT department here in the county, and it works pretty well, and I think that it's kind of looking at all of those issues that needs to be addressed. And that's what we're trying to really push toward, and I know the county executive is doing the same from his perspective, to try to make sure that we are going to, if we're going to deliver services, it's got to be delivered at today's quality.
It'll be the conversation that continues, so that's the kind of thing. And one reason. Okay, thank you. And Legislator Marcotte is here as well, right? I thank you, Rob. I'm sorry. Wait, and Mayor Davis came up to the front, so Mayor Ernie Davis is here from Mount Vernon as well. He's in, so we're not going to ask him to say hi. Just wait. But that's the kind of work that we're going to continue to do. Again, working together to get through it. The CIO was talking today about just being at Google this week and seeing some of the cloud services and that kind of thing to government-based services. And you all know here that we run a virtual office, so you can see video, including this kind of thing, and on site, online, anywhere, anytime. So, yes.
To be very brief, because I had a conversation with the fella, and I think all of this is wonderful stuff, and I hate to be pessimist, but I'm often accused of it.
Why not?
We in the county and a few others were the guinea pigs for the tax cap legislation this year because we're on a calendar year budget. And at the end of the day, the IT and all the other stuff, we're talking about 5% of our budget. And if we don't deal with the things that the county executive talked about, I can tell you the city of New Rochelle will be, in a couple of years, will either be looking for volunteers or we'll just be, not doing anything because it's under 75% of the municipality's cost, at least for us, is police, fire, and public works. And that's it, and the money is all in personnel. So while I support all of this, and we too, I believe, are in your IT stuff. We're talking. Those are the margins, and the big issues are the ones that we can't get the state to do anything on, and it's really very alarming. So I would just support what the county executive said about doing something about some sort of mandate relief that will affect us now, instead of 35 years from now when we all won't be here. That's enough.
All right, cool. Well, at this time, then, to talk about that is we'll start with Chuck to talk a little bit about the reassessment, reevaluation, or collaborative assessment process that we're at. Thank you so much. Right,
well,
so.
just to piggyback on what Lyndon said about being first in the country in terms of property tax burden, I think if you look at as a percentage of assessed value, we're about 37th in the nation.
Right.
But we really don't know what our assessed value is because, again, 1954, Yonkers, Mount Vernon, 1853 when you last reval, and then we get killed with the equalization rate. So, under the leadership of the chairman and the county board of legislators in the county, we issued this report last March. The report is almost a year old. Great critical acclaim. The Journal News loved it. Lots of municipal people liked it. It really looked at two things. One was collaborative assessment, and the other was supporting a home rule message that the county board of legislators would put forth to go to Albany to do reval. We then set out to try to get all the stakeholders to support such a measure, and we sort of got bogged down with the Westchester County Association. I think they believed that we should have uniform standards. They liked the collaborative assessment model, but when it got to homesteading and that big threshold, we went back and forth with them, and we're at the point where we're due for one more meeting to try to get that behind us, and then we're either going to come to you with their support or come to you without their support and see where it falls, because we really have to move on this. In terms of the $8 million that you put in the capital budget last year, because we were so hung up with the other thing, we didn't figure out how do we spend it and draw it down. But we have another number of municipalities from Mamaroneck to Peekskill to Yonkers that want to go forward with some portion of gathering the data necessary to do the reval, and we have to figure out how we bring the money down in an equitable portion from the county to the different municipalities so that we can continue forward progress. That's where we are.
Okay. And I'm looking at Supervisor Corbin that's just sneaking on the side there. When the legislation was initially adopted, the scenario was that whoever had gone out and done the photographic data last year, we compiled the data. David Jackson was out and offered training sessions to all the municipalities through WMOA to get the photographic data in, and now there's a gap on now how to get that into your local assessment systems, and that was what the funding was geared to do. There were municipalities like Joe and in Yonkers, and maybe another community, I'm not sure about that, I think I want to say Bronxville for whatever reason, that went out and had already done their reevaluation and had the data from that. And we said that what we would do for those municipalities is that they would be reimbursed at the rate that the county would pay. So obviously it may not be the same as what you put out, right? But it would be something. As far as the photographic data, yes.
I just want to let everyone know that the town of Mamaroneck is in the process of doing revaluation. We've initiated it, and they've started, and so far, have kind of revolution.
And from what I understand about Mamaroneck, the photographic data from the county was good, but not perfect, so they had to do some tweaks to it, which cost some money, but not nearly as much as it would have cost had the photographic data not been...
Which was the whole idea. The whole idea was to get to a baseline that the county could do, and obviously in different municipalities your requirements are different, right? Some of you have architecture in your housing that requires you to physically have someone go out and look at it versus, some maybe more cookie cutter like stuff that you can use the photographic data to help do the analysis of. So again, it was a baseline, to try to get us started. And now where we were asking for, and we were waiting for that information to come back from the municipalities to get that into your local systems to understand what it would cost to do that. And then we would work together again from the county level to figure out what we wanted to do and go forward from that. And then after you have that assessment data, the idea, at least in the initial discussions, was now you would understand what you would have to do in order to effectuate a whole county-wide reevaluation, right? Not trying to understand all the parameters first, because we can never figure them all out, and that's always the trick, right? So when it comes first, the chicken or the egg. So we were moving the ball slowly down the field because everyone around this table is getting hammered on certs, right? There's no one that's not. So we all understand that. We all understand that when we plus and come up to budgets, all of us in the municipalities are negotiating, you come up to a budget, you put out a number, you expect that's going to be the number people are actually going to get charged at the end. That's kind of the big goal, right? So that when we say this is the tax levy, it actually is the tax levy, right? When the zero is a zero, right? That kind of thing. And we want to continue to do that. So we'll continue to work through that process. Again, it's a combined effort. David Jackson is at the direction of the administration, and he's been wonderful to work with. IT department, Sam Ware, did the training for the individual municipalities with the photographic data to find out how you could utilize that. But we're continuing on to work through that process because, again, it's important for everybody around this table, right? I mean,
I just want to leave you with one number. In Yonkers, we have had between $10 and $14 million worth of tax certs each of the last 4 years. We've lost $100 million of value in the last 12 years. And if we've lost that, you get 25% of whatever we lose, so you lost value.
Right, and so we're all working together towards that. General question, Joe, and...
Well, I was just going to mention one of the, we did reval and ultimately we didn't get the anticipated benefit because the certiorari challenges didn't go down. And we looked at the reason why, and we basically have about 200, 250 certiorari challenges. 90% come in at 10 to 25%. So basically, and what happens is the bigger corporations hire a lawyer on a success fee basis. And they therefore may be not necessarily even more assessment review process, right? Because you come in at 10 to 25% of value, going straight to court. Now, we have, what I wanted to let you know is we have pending legislation, Assemblyman Latimer has put forward, it's been approved in Assembly statewide, where what we want to be able to do, we want people to, one, work with us in good faith, but two, if we got it wrong, we don't want them to let us know. So what the problem you have, as everybody probably knows, is they have 4 years to bring the case to court. So you sit there and wait for 4 years, and wait for the cases to accumulate, and then they come after you and wait for, of course, they don't file in 2006 when the market's booming. They file in 2011 when the market's flat on its back. So then you go to court. Now, our principal costs are hiring appraisals to fight the challenge, and then the lawyers. Now, they come at 10% of value, and then they just before they go to court, they give you the appraisal that they're at 80% of value. And you're therefore enormously incentive to compromise. Say, we won't go to court, we'll take a 10% reduction, and you're good to go. The problem is if you go to court, there's a 9% penalty interest rate.
Right.
That is applied across the full 4 years. So we have legislation in front of the Assembly that says we want to be able to bring the court case in the very same year, just like the SCAR. So they don't percolate for 4 years. So I just really want to let everyone know we have in front of Assembly Ladder any support you can give us with that legislation would be most appreciated.
That sounds good. Thanks.
One of the aspects, by the way, of the proposed legislation is we proposed 15% deviation. So if there wasn't 15% deviation, we couldn't even bring it. The county association prefers 10. We're willing to go there with 10, but that would help. Sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to say that Town of Pelham had reassessed a number of years ago. We were one of the first to do that. And after we got remote starters for our cars, everything started to calm down a little bit, and people realized that reassessment, it's an education system. Reassessment doesn't mean your taxes are going to go up.
reassessment for many people means their taxes are going to go down. It's just making it equitable for everyone in the community. We had a number of older homes that were probably double the value of some of the newer homes, and were assessed maybe a third of what the newer homes were assessed. So it kind of leveled the playing field. We've worked for the past, I think it's 9 years now, 10 years. I was mayor when we first did it. It's a number of years ago. But we've worked through with that every year. Our assessor makes sure that she updates the values, and it's on a continual basis. And I think this year and next year we're going through a full reval of every home. I mean, some of the newer ones and some of the ones that have had work, you need to go inside and see what has been done to it. But it's been quite successful for us so far. It's leveled out. The certs are not as serious. We're going through certs for the commercial district because we just increased our commercial district by quite a bit in Palomar. But it's been successful. It's great. It really helps with the making everyone. As I said, the biggest help is that it reduced our search. But it's a lot of work, and you have to keep after it. And if you keep it up and you maintain your roles, it's very advantageous.
All right, so that's kind of where we are right now on that particular topic. But again, it's not something, we're all continuing to work through this together because we know, again, it has to be a joint effort, and it's education, right? And the more folks are educated, the less likely you will need remote starters, right, to do that. And at this point in time, we're going to go to stormwater and talk with MaryJane Shimsky. MaryJane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm actually doing two topics, both of which involve maintaining our infrastructure. First topic is concerns the stormwater advisory boards. That's what a stormwater advisory board looks like. Westchester County legislators, representatives from the various municipalities in a river basin, and we exchange information and talk about issues, and we're able to move this that much further to action on what has become one of the most serious issues most of our municipalities are facing right now. Next slide. The Stormwater Advisory Board law that Chairman Jenkins alluded to before was passed early in 2011. The law authorizes the creation of a stormwater management plan. There are two levels of stormwater advisory boards, or as I will call them for the rest of the talk, SWABs. The county-wide SWAB is comprised of 12 members. 5 appointed by the county executive and 5 by the Board of Legislators. The planning commissioner and 1 county legislator, I was the one who was appointed to be the county legislator, serve as ex officio members on the board. The main function of the county-wide SWAB is to identify problem areas and solutions on a county-wide basis. The legislation also authorized the creation of basin-wide SWABs. The chief elected official of each municipality in the relevant watershed appoints 1 representative. The main function of these, of course, is to consult with the county-wide SWAB. Now, let's go to the first of these lovely cards. This is a map of Westchester County. There are 6 main watersheds, river basins, in the county. Inland Long Island Sound, Croton River, Peekskill and Haverstraw Bay, Coastal Long Island Sound, the Bronx River, and the Pocantico/Sawmill River. The countywide SWAB began meeting. We had our first meeting last month. It is a crew of incredibly gifted people with extensive experience in engineering, in planning, and in intergovernment relations. We should be able to do some really outstanding work. The Bronx River Basin is starting to pull together a SWAB now. I know that some of you in the audience, I see you, Tom, have received your letters asking for representatives to be appointed so we can call a first meeting. The one swab, which has been meeting for the last 7 months now, is the Pecatogo/Sawmill River swab. That involves several legislative districts, including mine. I've been chairing the meetings of this swab. Now, we'll start going through the flooding photos. You may not know the specific places, but I'm sure these will all look a little bit familiar to all of you. In the Sawmill River Basin, we have had flooding for decades in the Pleasantville area. Along the Sawmill River Parkway, it's backed up into the neighborhoods. As you can see, it's a big problem for homes. It's a big problem for people who have to get to work. You can go to the next slide, Tara. Here's Manville Road area. We could keep going. Now, between Hurricane Floyd, which I believe took place in 1998, and the big nor'easter on April 16th, 2007, I could probably count on one hand the number of times the more southern reaches of the Sawmill River Parkway actually had to close down. I live in Hastings, so I'm pretty attuned to that. Since the nor'easter in 2007, the situation has gotten worse. This past year, this area of the sawmill has been closed, whether for a couple hours or a day, somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 to 12 times in 1 year. So we're definitely experiencing increasing problems. This is the area near the new Rivertown Square development in the Dobbs Ferry, Ardsley, Hastings area. Going through. This is near the Cliff Street exit, the first exit going south toward Hastings. You can see how bad the water buildup is through here. Those are 3 of my son's friends from Hastings High School riding a kayak down the Sawmill River. That was right after Hurricane Irene. Okay. This area, I think, is actually over the border into Yonkers. As you can see, Yonkers isn't immune from this problem either. Eventually, things dry out, or sometimes they don't get too bad. But you can see in this picture how everything comes up from the river and manages eventually, as you saw, to envelop the highway. There's an enveloped highway. Okay. Now, the localities in the area wanted solutions, and they wanted them right away. I mean, my basement floods. You get the desperate calls from people whose basements are flooding. Everybody wonders how they're going to get to work in the morning when the parkways go down. So obviously it's a problem that we have to minimize. We didn't wait in the Sawmill River Basin for the county-wide swab to begin meeting because, as I said, this was a very bad spring and summer season for the Sawmill River. So we got our first meeting up and running at the end of July in 2011. We've been meeting faithfully every month since. I even missed the budget meeting to make sure that our swab kept going, because I believe it's important to have the regular meetings so we could keep each other all up to date and to keep the momentum going. If you start skipping meetings, people begin to fall by the wayside. At the very first meeting, when we asked you municipal officials, our boots on the ground, what is the first thing you want to think about in terms of making an immediate impact? I think Jo Mayberry may have been the very first person to speak up, and she said that the debris which had gathered in the river was causing a real problem. Most of the right-of-way along the Sawmill River is actually owned by state DOT. Our ownership varies from river to river. The Bronx River, of course, is basically a county-run operation. We had different issues because most of our problems were going to have to be dealt with by state DOT. So we called in Senator Stuart Cousins' office. She's been sending a representative on a monthly basis, and with all of our joint efforts, we managed to bring in DOT cleanup crews. These crews have complemented the efforts of the town of Greenburgh and the village of Elmsford, which were actually the first people on the sides of the river pulling out the tree trunks and all of the debris. At this point, we're also getting help from various state and federal agencies. There is a joint task force that has asked the municipalities to fill out questionnaires online locating where your big debris dams are. A lot of you, I take it, have probably filled out that form. So we're starting to get a critical mass of help now. Let's go to the... All right, let's see what a debris dam looks like exactly. You get the branches forming. Here you have them forming underneath the bridge, which means eventually the bridge will be flooded over once that accumulates. Yeah. Yeah, any family of beavers would be proud. Go to the video. Go to the next one. See, most of it is tree matter in the Sawmill River, although you have a lot of garbage. In the Bronx River, you have more silt, I think, than branches. Next one. Okay, we'll watch the DOT starting to clean up. Okay, you can keep going through them now. We are now dealing with issues along the lines of regularizing debris cleanup, so that way we'll have regular efforts and we won't have the big pileups of garbage again. Assessing and, where appropriate, reactivating flood control infrastructure. When these debris dams were being cleaned by the town of Greenburgh, we found a sluice gate on Woodlands Lake in Ardsley. We need to locate these and determine whether it's worthwhile to reactivate them. We need to identify infrastructure projects and learn and disseminate low-impact development techniques to improve on-site stormwater management. I understand that my time is up. I don't want to hold you up. If anybody wants to talk about bridges, you have a bridge condition rating list in your packet. You can search for these are just county-owned bridges. You can search for the bridges in your municipalities on this list. Everything north of that solid dark line on the first page are bridges that are on DOT's deficient list. So if you have any questions, you can always get in touch with the board or your individual legislator. Thank you.
I have a little bit of the bridge. Mary Beth.
Yeah, the higher than a little bit of the bridge.
Yes.
You have a kind of different situation with regard to septic and stormwater in that basin, but nonetheless, it's certainly a very expensive problem, and I would be very interested in learning a little bit more about the job teams and how we get the Croton River Basin's job team underway, because certainly our issues are immediate and they relate very closely to the unfunded mandates that have been mentioned earlier. So if I could get some information as to how
Are you, not meaning to cast any aspersions, but you're one of the legislators in the Croton watershed?
I am indeed, and that's a great segue to what I was going to speak about. Jim Palmer is on the county-wide one, so we can talk about the Croton region one. And Supervisor Murphy brings up was a great segue, and I promise to be 60 seconds or less here because it has to deal with both mandates and municipalities taking a shared approach. You know, we all deal with the mandates, things like Medicaid, pensions, those kind of things, but there are environmental mandates as well that are unfunded. Those of you on the Sound Shore got a bill for, I believe it was $235 million for nitrogen remediation. And we in the north are now dealing, and this is what Supervisor Murphy was alluding to, a $150 million bill for phosphorus remediation. And that's what the stormwater efforts are dealing with in the north. It's been a collaborative effort. The NWWC, led by Supervisor Murphy, are leading those efforts on the local level. working with the administration. We were able to free $10 million of the first $50 million that's being cobbled together with the state and New York City. But that second $100 million, the funding for that is still out there. And the other thing I wanted to mention is there's a septic component of that. You don't have to live in the north to have septic systems. I personally know of at least 7 in Yonkers. And we have, we're reconstituting for this term our septic subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the Committee on Environment and Energy. And it sounds funny, we get a lot of ribbing, but it's actually the most crowded meeting we have here other than budget and appropriations where money is being spent. And I don't even want to say it's a bipartisan group, it's a nonpartisan group. And it's a working group of stakeholders in the septic arena. And this is so critical and so many people come because it's a vital environmental issue, but it's also a critical economic issue. And this is kind of the one area where environmentalists and the business community have come together in agreement in many cases, is on the need for enhanced treatment units and modernizing technology. So I'm going to the point of people coming together to work together. It's legislators, it's the administration, it's the Department of Health, it's the Department of Planning, it's many local officials, it's the NWWC, it's New York City, it's New York State, it's members of the environmental community and members of the business community. And we meet here once a month. We were the ones who helped negotiate with DEC the septic management component of the new enhanced MS4s for the Croton watershed and the model local ordinance that all of the towns passed. And this term, we're looking at 2 things: the enhanced treatment units and the decentralized systems, which are a lot less expensive than the new sewage treatment plants in some cases that have been mandated by DEP. So we've got interest in that. And then also working with the county health department are revising the new regs dealing with 75A, which are the state regulations for septic systems. So that's essentially what we're doing. It's shared services, it's economic, it's the environment. We invite anyone to attend, elected official, your representatives. Our first meeting is here today at 3:30.
And again, we want to say again, everyone being involved, including the federal levels, because a lot of it is clean water, right? Items that are driven from clean water. And as quiet as it's kept, the folks in Yonkers are concerned about the septic systems up in the northern part because that's where we get our water from. And that's actually part of that education process that we continually have to talk about. And with the administration, the Commissioner Laurel, and worked with DEP and DEC, and we did some things as far as wastewater treatment facilities in some of the areas that were necessary, where the state basically said to us, well, let's work this deal out so that we can deal with the water issue that you were talking about as well, which is, I guess, $125, $140 million number for treatment of water if we have to build up. No, that's only if we have to build this ultraviolet plant. We're not even talking about the stormwater separation things, as you said. We have to really work together to fix this problem, and it's going to cost something. And the question is, what is it going to cost, and how do we deal with it?
The chairman alluded to the fact that all of these things, we talk about state mandates, all of these stem from the Clean Water Act, from the federal government. And when the Clean Water Act was first passed, the federal government funded 90% of clean water projects. Today that figure is 10%. So when we talk about mandates, we seriously also have to talk about getting the federal government back in the clean water infrastructure game, because any of these environmental mandates, we draw a direct line to the Clean Water Act, because the state DEC will say we're only enforcing the Clean Water Act, and they're one of the 43, I believe, state agencies charged with doing that. So when we talk about mandates, yes, the state, but we've also got to work on the federal government.
The meeting this afternoon is with the 75A. Does that have to do with the updated list for the Department of Health for the pump outs, sewer pump outs?
No, 75A are the state regulations on the specifications for a septic system. And then the county has an overlay over that. So we're going to begin that discussion vis-a-vis enhanced technologies. But we're also going to have a very brief discussion to what you're talking about. George Oros is going to come, Supervisor Lucas is going to be here, and we're going to talk about the database a little bit. I understand there have been some issues there, and George will come to address Warren's concerns.
That was a good example of what we hope to be a shared service.
Exactly,
We
thank you.
continue to hope that to be a shared service. And since I have the floor, I just have to say to Legislator Shimsky, it's been a pleasure. I didn't know I was in a swab. When he originally came at him, I think you offered us to come, and I didn't know what I was coming for, except out of frustration over the flooding conditions and the absolute lack of response from the Department of Transportation, even though they're lovely people, and I can name them all by hand because I contact them constantly, but only because of shared approach with having to either go to other elected people and maybe even visiting Albany, did we get DOT to move. And DOT is moving, and they need to be congratulated on that, but I don't think we could have done it unless we all worked together, because they ignore the local people.
All right.
Thank you.
I think all of us are now pledging our swabs.
Well, now a swab is a good thing.
There were swabs and a swab.
Yes, I guess I'm more of a follow-up to Legislator Shimsky, too. And funding for flooding projects may be the shortest subject of the whole meeting, because there's not a lot of it, although I do understand the county's distributing some funding today, particularly for a project that will benefit both New Rochelle, Scarsdale, and Eastchester. So we thank you for that. How I'm going to come up with the 50% match, I have no idea, but that's neither here nor there. What we did in the Long Island Sound watershed, and the mayor of Mamaroneck will know, we have just as many horrible pictures as you do of our flooding. And we have, for about 10 years, actually formed, I guess you could call a precursor to a SWAB, which is the Long Island Sound Intermunicipal Watershed Council, of which there are 13 representatives, municipalities. And our original goal was to try to get state legislation for the creation of a stormwater district, so we have a separate funding stream for these projects, and that didn't go anywhere. So we actually worked with the county, Al Gatta in particular, on the legislation that you cited. And one of the things that I would recommend that people do if they're looking for funding, because outside of what's happening today, future funding has to go under this legislation that you all have created, and there has to be plans for the watershed developed and project and priority lists put together and then submitted to the county's overall board for the funding when it becomes available. Liswick is actually using some of our own money, the municipality's money, to hire a consultant to help us draft what is required under your law, which is what they're calling a reconnaissance plan. The reconnaissance plan is basically a assessment of conditions, a listing of projects and priorities that can be submitted. So the watersheds that don't have that in the works should really get to do that, because that's the future through the county funding. Also, municipalities individually ought to move towards getting their hazard mitigation plan approved by FEMA, because that is the only way you will be eligible for FEMA money. You have to have an approved hazard mitigation plan, and you can call SEMO. I don't know if SEMO exists anymore, but some state agency will help you get through the adoption of that plan. There are not a lot of municipalities in Westchester that have adopted it, and you need that. So it's sort of a way of putting the money together, because the money that the county is going to allocate today, we have also applied for a FEMA grant for the same project, and hopefully we can use the matches here and there and talk to the state people. But there isn't a lot of funding available that does not require a local match, and that's where we're going to all find a problem, because much to the brilliance of our state legislators, not our legislators, but state government, the capital cost for infrastructure is not exempt from the cap, and therefore you bond something, which is really the only way. The project that the county is funding today is a $5 million project, so our share is $2.5 million. There's no way in the world that I can come up with $2.5 million short of bonding it. And the problem with bonding it is the minute I do that, because my fund balance is so low, I'm going to get a rating review and I'm going to be downgraded. So there are all sorts of problems that go along with it. So I think the idea of doing these projects on a regional basis through the SWABs, the districts, whatever you call them, is the future of it, and bundling the money from the upper levels of government so that we can get some done. The $5 million or the $2.5 million that we're getting from the county today is good news and bad news. When I told the mayor, I said the good news is we've got money. The bad news is we got to come up with money, and none of us know how to do it. So my only two suggestions would be to form some kind of a group like Liswick, or informally or formally, and work with the county planning department, because they're the ones that are responsible to submit these reconnaissance plans for the watersheds to the county board for their approval. And Liswick is trying to get ahead of the curve so that when money does become available, we can pump our projects right in, and also get those hazard mitigation plans approved locally, because you can't get any federal money unless you have one. That's FEMA has come down and told municipalities that. So that's really what it is on the funding.
And Chuck, it just, again, when we work through legislation, and one of the things that it's always fun, you've all been through this process of making the sausage, right? Part of the part that we should continue to do is you should give us that continued feedback, because there were certainly people in Legislator Abernathy, MaryJane's predecessor, that was one of his concerns in the initial set of legislation, and we had discussions with it and we made modifications. But we can always modify legislation hearing impact on the local municipalities, because again, whether we try to come up to a bigger group, as you said, Chuck, like a regional group that will help build enough need at a level where you can get funding at that level, which is why you do that at the regional level, at the county level, or other things. So we're going to continue to work through the process. It's not the end, right? So it's something that we're going to continue to do.
Actually, the county legislation is good because it does also force the municipality to do something.
Right.
They have to do their catch basin cleaning. They have to develop plans and priorities and get engineering projects. So it's not just county, give us money and we're going to spend it. In order to qualify, you have to do certain basic things as a municipality that you probably ought to be doing. You may not be able to afford to do it, but you got to figure out a way. At least to keep clean your catch basins, have a storm crew and a sewer crew, and when you have problem areas, you got to engineer them and come up with a solution before you ask for money to implement the solution. So I think the law as written was very good, and is at least a good way to go forward. Always going to be amended if it has to be, but it's pretty good now.
Thank you. Jim.
Just to add to what you mentioned about the hazard mitigation plan, unfortunately, because of the heavy rain that we've all experienced in the past year, it became clear to my municipality that we wouldn't get any funding unless we had a hazard mitigation plan. And to echo what you said, I believe there's only 2 or 3 municipalities that have it. I did speak to Jennifer Waka, and maybe we can consider this. She said the county, of course, has one, and that maybe we could somehow piggyback on it. I'm going to go ahead and get my own, but I think it's understood from FEMA that it's better when it's done.
It's true.
3 or 4 different municipalities, and if maybe that's a shared service the county could help us with, get us to do it together, and then even the economy of scale for the piece that we'd have to pay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the best ways for people to organize may be along the lines of these maps, along the river basins, because logically speaking, that's where all the water's flowing from and flowing to. So if you're going to integrate, that seems to be the way to do it. One of the few communities that has a plan at this point is the town of Greenburgh, which is just downstream from Mount Pleasant. If there's a way for the surrounding municipality, right?
I will look into that opportunity.
Right.
I hadn't aware of it until.
Learn what you can substantively and procedurally from Greenburgh, and hopefully it will make your process go faster. And the more of us along the basin who have our plans in place, the better when we do identify specific projects and we're ready to...
I guess I'm thinking they should become part of the SWAB, that if we're all sitting together talking about flooding, that somehow, the way you helped us with the DOT, that somebody say to the communities who are not thinking about it at the time, go get a hazard mitigation plan, or go work with Pleasantville, go work with the Ossining that's next door to you, and develop a plan, or we'll help you develop a plan, or get it done so that we don't miss these opportunities.
Absolutely.
We actually hired a consultant. We hired a consultant that I believe CMO paid for through a grant. So there are ways to do it, and they'll walk you. It's not very hard. We can provide our plan to whoever wants it as a copy. And the county law actually does require these projects by watershed, not by municipalities within the watershed can apply for grants, but it has to be a watershed plan developed before you can do that, which is the logical way to go.
Yeah, actually, it goes dramatic. Ironically, is Monday we'll be submitting our all hazard mitigation plan to FEMA. But I would note that FEMA requirements actually state that before any individual homeowner can do it, the municipality must first come up with their all-hazard mitigation plan. And then the municipality then submits, after the all-hazard mitigation plan, the request for funding from FEMA. And there are about 4 or 5 different programs you can do, up to the best one, of course, is 90% reimbursement by the feds to raise your house above the flood line. But nothing's going to happen until you do it. So even if the county does it, the local municipality is required to do it. And I will tell you that you should do it, because anytime you flood, you're going to get the grief from the homeowners, because they do call up and they find out and they say, why the hell aren't you doing something for your residents? And that's what it comes down to. It's something you need to do.
Well, I got to go upstairs. I got a 1:30 meeting, but I wanted to, before I go, if there's any specific questions for me. I know we have been reaching out to everybody. George Oros is meeting with some of you individually, as we have and I have. And I know one of the issues with the CDBG funding that's on this, the third year of that cycle, which is now, has not been funded, the $7 million by HUD. That obviously is something that we're dealing with right now in a very big way. The next cycle is up in the air. We're proceeding as if it is going to be funded, although at this point we don't know. One of the cases that we've been making is it does affect communities that are not in the so-called 31 eligible in the settlement, and so I've met with them in D.C. We meet in New York. We have talked on the phone many times. And this is just one issue that's part of a bigger issue that we're dealing with, clearly, with the housing settlement and back in federal court on 2 separate issues. So I know that was one of the issues on the agenda today, the CDBG, but that's where it stands right now.
Rob, can I just make a quick statement on that, actually, because I know you have to leave, but this is important to you. The good news is this is probably the one item on the agenda that doesn't require money.
Yeah.
The other thing, right, the great idea is that if we had millions of dollars to invest, we really could kick a lot of tail. But the bad news is that there's 3 basic problems that and your opening comments, by the way, about staying at 30,000 feet and everything that pertains to everybody, were good, and this obviously isn't that. But while I think it's good to have to focus on the common good, we have to focus more on this. Been 3 big impacts to the ineligible community. One, you've actually re-steered CDBG awards from 2011 from needy communities like Worcester to less needy communities, or actually to pay for the planning staff. And that's like akin to a reverse Robin Hood, right? Taking from the poor to the rich. So I don't know if we're ever going to get that money back. I mean, like, speaking personally, I fought for 3 years to get a housing rehab program funded, $500,000, and I learned in December it went to pay enormous staff. Ouch. So that's a problem, like getting that money back. But the bigger problem that all of the ineligible communities who need the CDBG the most, that their funding is on hold. If there's something you can do to extricate us from the legal mess that you all are in with this housing lawsuit, it would be much appreciated, because the unintended consequences, the people who need the help most, are the people who aren't getting the CDBG.
Well, that's the ironic part of this that we've been trying to
And
tell
the third
HUD.
issue is your discretionary funding, and even communities like Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, and White Plains that aren't in the D-Yonkers, that aren't in the consortium, to the extent that you guys are focusing as a strategy, all your discretionary funding to go to these eligible communities, you're forgetting, and I don't mean to speak for the other communities, but by defocusing on the ineligible communities, you're in essence ignoring the most needy communities for these discretionary funding sources. So please, extricate us from the freeze. If there's a way we can do it on our own or something like that, I think we could have a separate discussion on that. But please keep that in the forefront of your mind, for they have to be ineligible communities.
Anything else? Thank you. Nice to see everybody. You're continuing. Thank you very much.
Good to see you. And George is going to stay. George, you staying, right? Thank you. All right. All right. Well, let's just go back real quick. Were there any additional comments on the flooding? That, again, it's a continuing process, and it's a continuing process of all of us working together and trying to find out that right level and mix, and that's between laws that we'll develop and policy that the board develops and how it gets executed, working with the administration on that kind of thing. But Dennis, as you met, yeah, Mary.
Just a real quick question. As we're doing this on a county-wide initiative, in some of the districts, there may be impacts from other counties.
Yep.
So are we working with Putnam County as well?
Yeah, well, the
I suspect that there's a lot of informal cooperation going on, but
Formal in the north on the MS4.
but not under the SWAB rubric.
No, but under,
Right.
but this is under the phosphorus
Yeah.
remediation.
So depending on what the issue is, there may be a structure in place or there may not be a structure in place. What ends up happening is when you try to figure out the best way to do something, people come up with ideas from the top and then people try to implement from the bottom, and sometimes you end up with a asymmetry. And what we have, that's one of the asymmetries we're going to end up with stormwater management is, for example, the Sawmill River Basin is pretty much all contained in Westchester County, but of course there are others that are not.
Our watershed, because we have our own water source, we have our own watershed, and probably 80% of our watershed is in Putnam County.
Right.
And so I didn't know if we had formal structures, and so the whole issue about septic and the impacts, and ours is an open water source on watersheds, as much as it's important to the Croton watershed and the New York City watersheds, ours are all in Putnam County, and so I was just curious if we had any formal structures. I mean, we deal with Bob Tendy from Putnam Valley very collaboratively on some joint projects, but I mean, we're accustomed to forging along with our neighbors. Just wanted to know if we had something formal.
Actually, to that point, the actually, you're more fortunate in that at least it's still New York State. The Long Island Sound, the coastal Long Island Sound, and especially the inland Long Island Sound watersheds have a lot of issues with Connecticut that gets very dicey.
Yeah, so, but as far as, we have several formal agreements going on with Putnam County. We do a lot of work together with Putnam County. Our Workforce Investment Board is Westchester Putnam, so there's a continuing dialogue between us and Putnam County. As far as the sewage treatment plant that we're building in Peach Lake, that's, obviously something that our Commissioner Lauro and speaking with Putnam County about. So we'll have to continue to make sure that that's formalized if it's not in the SWAB methodology.
Right, the stormwater, I think we're not as far advanced in that. So as we need it, you should keep in touch with your legislator and with us so that we can try to figure out the best way to try to fan out and incorporate them.
And Mayor Tom, I'm just going to give you just, Mary Beth.
I was just going to say, we have a very formal relationship with Putnam County with regard to the stormwater issues in Westchester. And Mary, I'd be happy to discuss with you how we kind of came to this point. It took a few years, but we were working extremely collaboratively with them.
Okay, good.
We started, we actually formed a corporation to address the issues. So,
I have a question, if I might, Mr. Chairman. You formed a public benefit corporation or an LDC? Okay. How long have you been?
We formed it in November.
They just did that.
And God willing, it will be funded by March.
Good luck with that.
Well, we have the sources in place.
Yeah, great.
We work very closely with both the Eastern Hudson funds that Westchester County holds, as well as the Eastern Hudson funds that Putnam County holds, and with DEP with the help of the DEC, they're funding for them. So it's been a long process, though, and I think we all admit that, but it is.
Do you feel as if that's going to cover the whole process from policy making to implementation, or are you going to need more or different kinds of structures?
It's developed to cover the first 5 years of the mandated stormwater retrofits. That's what we are funding for at this point in time. A lot of the funding can't be used for necessarily advocacy and things like that, so we have a separate group called the Stormwater Coalition, which handles much of the advocacy area, but I mean, it can be done, and it was we originally kind of formed two groups, one in Westchester and one in Putnam, but we've now come together and Duchess actually is on board. Oh, fab. So we have to share with you our experiences. Maybe you can get it down to a year and a half instead.
Again, thank you, Mary, but that's great. Again, that conversation has to continue, and we'll keep going there. Dennis, just because you spoke about the CDBG funding for a second, and I'm assuming that was the comment that you wanted to make. But just from the things that we've been working with together, the county executive was very clear in saying that we're in the middle of a process, right? That's in federal court to deal with that. The board certainly has a concern about the CDBG funding that goes to individual municipalities for the various projects that are already in the pipeline. So we're concerned about that. I didn't hear that one that you just mentioned, so we will follow up on that because again, the funding that was halted in May of this year was not any similar than it happened in 2009, right? Where our funding, CDBG funding, was held in 2009. We suspect that we will get through this process eventually, right? When eventually is, but we will get through this process. And we will have a resolution on it. So we don't want to, we'll have to talk with the administration and find out which things that we would like to make sure that move forward in advance, and things that may need to wait and be on hold until after we get through this process. Because again, there was not a scenario where we thought there would be a negative impact to other municipalities that were not in the stipulation zone, right? That the non-impacted communities, we worked through this last year, if I recall correctly, on making sure that were not the same requirements, that the language was different for non-stipulation communities based on the facts. So we did that, worked with the administration, we were able to get that done, and I suspect that we'll be able to do some similar things in this particular round, depending on what the thing actually is. Because if it's a senior center project that's going on, we don't think we want to stop it in the middle, and certainly the county has an ability to have that discussion. So thank you for bringing it up. Again, I don't believe we were aware of it from the board side, and we also have a policy concern that we've been working with the administration, which is that there was not a policy that has been adopted from the county, right? That's been adopted by the board, presented by the county executive, and adopted by the board that says that we're not going to invest anywhere other than in stipulation communities. As a matter of fact, it's actually the opposite, right? The board's direction is that we weren't going to stop investing in non-stipulation communities because we know that we're going to continue to support fair and affordable housing. At least from the board's perspective, we added in money into the budget to do that. It moved forward, so we expect that we're going to continue to do that level of investment to create sustainable communities where people can age in place, and they'll be able to retire and live in a community that they grew up in and loved, and sell their house, but move to downsize, if you will, right, to do that. So we're going to continue to work through that together. So thanks for bringing it up, and we'll continue to follow it up. So payment for snow and ice removal on county roads. Mayor.
This is quick,
Yeah.
but you have a personal interest in how we clear the roads in White Plains, so you guys have to get to work too. Over the years that I've been on the council, constantly heard from our DPW that the reimbursement rates are a fraction of the actual cost. Like they say 10 cents on a dollar, they may be exaggerating, but very low. And then in meeting with Municipal Officials Association, I find that everyone feels you hear the same thing. And what happens is that when I first came on as a lawyer, I'd say, well, are we negotiating? And there's no negotiating, it's take it or leave it. And I kind of understand that because otherwise you have to answer to all the other communities that weren't part of it. So what I thought is it might be an opportunity to maybe put a small group together where we could sit down, get some of the DPW people together with the county people and see if we can't work on this a little bit and see where we are and do something fair for everybody. We see a value in clearing the streets, and I see an efficiency in it. Obviously, for us, 57,000 a year, 200 to 250 during the day. It's crucial to us that our street people associate White Plains with clear streets in the snow. But, so we see some value in it, so we're not looking for 100%. I don't think anybody would look for that. But I just think we're looking to do a little bit better. And it might help me with my kids because since I've been mayor now, I used to think snow was charming. And my kids said to me, "You think it's going to snow this year?" I said, "I hope not." Because when I see snow now, I see money burning in the street. I don't see it like charming, landscape. So, I think that's something that we could do. I think that might be a more organized way to kind of look at the issue. It's not a major issue, but there's a fairness side to it. So. I thought maybe we could do something.
Certainly, again, George is getting this down, we're getting this down as well, so that we'll take a look at that from whether it's reimbursement rates on county roads, but then when we get to shared services, again, we have a big formula, and we got to work through it together, because again, there may be people that think that says, oh, well, we do X, right, and, we're not giving the right rate on the county road, right, but we're doing this other thing, and again, we just need to get through that and hear all the concerns said and address them. Right?
I mean, I'll just add one thing onto what the mayor from White Plains has said. I'm not sure, in the towns, if the roads clearing is really a state responsibility versus a county responsibility, and whether the county responsibility is really just only within the cities. But I will tell you, in our city, our primary routes that we have to clear first and keep clear are all the county roads. And so it's worse than not even being paid a fair fee. Our residential neighborhoods get put on the second and third back burner while we keep the main arteries clear, which are all the county roads. And so it has, and so I'll get the complaints from the neighborhoods where, the plow got there once in 6 hours or 7 hours, and they can't make it up the hill because we're a hilly city. Yet the county roads are great. So if you can get to the county road, you can get to work. And, sometimes the suggestion is you take a sled and get to the county road.
Wow.
So it has a very different impact in some of the cities because that's the main thoroughfares we're keeping open. The buses are on it, the emergency vehicles, and you don't get paid really anything for it.
And I know that there was a push through budget and appropriations and public works, parks, labor, transportation, which is now government operations, basically to shed the county roads in return for fair and affordable housing and open space issues and that kind of thing, to be able to do that. And the question is what shape the roads in, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to continue to have that conversation because I know that we
we could also give use of our roads.
I think that for whatever reason, there was 136 miles of road, I want to say 136 miles of county road that we have remaining, and I know that there's different philosophical points of view about whether or not to try to shed those or to maintain them, etc. So we'll continue to talk about it, and I understand your point because again, if somebody sees that street clear, right? But
I think there's also a point that's been raised, if I'm not mistaken, that the state has been actually pretty good on keeping up with sort of regular increases in costs that have occurred.
But the county has.
And the county has.
Right.
I think around the table a number of the municipalities mentioned that as being.
If I could ask you all to do this, if you could just send we'll ask you in committee as well, but your individual concerns, because obviously the state rates are different. We'll have a committee meeting, go through that process, and dig it out and understand what the difference is in government operations. And as you know, one of your colleagues is now a legislator who chairs that committee, so I'm sure that Legislator Borgia will be sensitive to that particular concern. Right?
It's one of the rare times that anybody said anything nice about the state.
Wow. I know it was actually very startling. I'm like, what's going on
What we
there?
all agreed on is that, most of us start out as council members, and one of the first things you learn is which of the state and county roads. So when you get the phone calls, you can say, "What are you talking about? Oh, it's county."
Oh, okay.
Oh, it doesn't work anymore. I now have residents sending me emails that say, I don't even want to hear who owns the road. I want it paid.
Trust me, I'm a county road, it's just Tuckahoe Road, and people don't care. It's like, clear it. So, all right, got it. Mayor, Sue.
Well, this is the biggest elephant, obviously, in the room, but one in which there's not too much role that we all have, but, and I know the county executive has expressed his opinions, virtually everybody involved has expressed their opinion that the recent change of the project, downsizing it from a corridor project that would have included mass transit to one that's just basically a bridge replacement project, is not one that has generally been favored around the county.
the bridge project transformed into just a highway replacement, a bridge replacement project, and they're on a very accelerated schedule of review, and they make the argument. There's a twofold argument for why they did what they did. One is that they have maintained that if they include mass transit in any form, it so complicates the process that they can't get it done and perhaps can't get access to some funding if it doesn't happen quickly. And the other is that there is no funding, that they haven't identified funding. For that matter, they haven't identified the funding for the scaled-down project yet either. As part of the draft environmental impact statement, funding's not discussed yet. They're promising to do it sometime in the spring. So there's a March 1st public hearing on the DEIS that the state is holding at the Marriott in Tarrytown or Greenberg, whichever one you want to call it. I would just, I think everybody is asked to express their disappointment at the project, and it was basically it's been a unanimous sense of the municipalities.
Absolutely, on both sides of the river, saying that there has to been, there should be an option for that, and how are we going to address that, whether it was through bus rapid transit and that kind of things that were concerns. One of the biggest, I guess for all of us, you're like, when do you start? So you started getting something down the pipe, and the announcement said, all right, we're going to do this, and now we have some funding, and we're going to identify some private-public partnerships to be able to do this. That's good. Everyone's great. Thumbs up on it. Said, but it's missing this key component in public transportation, as far as infrastructure is concerned, how's that being built in, etc. I think that everyone needs to continue to express that concern, because I don't believe any of us want to say don't do anything, right? Right? But we want to be in a position of saying that this is a very important, important topic that we need to deal with, and how do we deal with that, and whether it's as simple as an HOV lane or whatever it is, so to get to some really complex issues where you talk through BRTs and transportation hubs and how those are going to link together, which just brings in an additional set of complexity that all of us are aware of when we start having to go through municipalities and say, well, who's getting in Tarrytown, where's that landing spot going to be? Right. So again, we should not ignore the difficult issues, right? But I know all of us look around and say, let's not let the perfect get in the way of the good, but let's make sure that we have this out. So certainly, I think that the point you're making, Mayor, is that people should continue to express. I'm not sure disappointment is the thing that we want to say. Hey, this is good. However, right?
Well, I think the issue is that that there's any sort of commitment to it is absent from the project, from what they're doing.
Right.
And what hasn't been answered, and I actually think there ought to be an answer, is prior to this, the last iteration, they had this tiered review approach, which was a change from what they had before. The first approach was it was all in one, and then they tiered it, and they sort of split apart the mass transit from the highway improvements. And I can't, aside from the money issue, which I think, quite frankly, is the real issue, is that they haven't figured out where the money's come from, and they don't want to set it aside, and they don't want to find the money. That is probably driving the explanation of the other half of this. So that's what I think is most problematic, is that there's no commitment at all, and as we all know, mass transit is expensive, and it never makes money. So, and prior to this, the sense was always the highway project was always the door to getting mass transit, and that's what's missing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I just wanted to say, I did speak to Joan McDonald of the DOT last week, and she wants to come and speak to us about their feeling, because I think myself and Legislator Shimsky and anyone else who attended the first hearings indicated that the mass transit was, as far as we were concerned, something that was a very necessary prerequisite to moving forward with this plan. Her rationale was that if they included the mass transit, not only was there cost involvement that they couldn't identify at this point, but it would delay the process for an additional 2 years. I don't know about the rest of you, but my feeling is that the project has been delayed for about 8-10 years already, and I don't know whether an additional 2 years is going to make that much difference in terms of Westchester County. Now, I understand that the idea is to move the people from Orange County down to Westchester and New York City. However, the benefit for the residents of Westchester County, I'm very skeptical about that, because it looks to me from the existing plans that were submitted that it's going to turn Tarrytown and Elmsford into giant parking lots on rush hour mornings, and especially on Friday afternoons. It's already a problem, and if you add an additional lane of traffic coming across, and that's all it will be basically, is an supposedly earthquake-proof bridge with an additional lane of traffic, it's going to create more types than we have now, and without any idea of solving that for two years, which will probably lengthen into 3 or 4, depending on construction schedules.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a lot of, the reason why we've been reinventing the process and going on, I think we're in our 12th year at least on reviewing plans for this bridge, is that you are dealing with a series of interrelated, very complex problems bordering on the intractable. Based on, I went to those the stakeholder meetings when I worked in Assemblyman Brodsky's office for 3.5 years before I became a legislator. So I've been to the meetings, I've talked to the engineers. That current bridge was not built to last, and to the amount of money you would have to put into it to make it last is absolutely astounding. So you need a new bridge. I'm convinced of that, but the problem is mass transit's an excellent idea. It should be on there. I mean, I don't see how we get the train on. The train would double or triple the cost of the whole project. BRT, bus rapid transit, on the other hand, is something that we definitely have to work toward, but I was going to talk about a bridge that we're having a hard time finding $20 million to fix. Where the extra $2 billion is going to come from is there are definitely sympathetic arguments on each side, and it's going to take a lot of creativity. And in terms of the process, what we're seeing around this table, and the same is true with the stormwater management legislation, where you have very complex problems that deal with multiple jurisdictions and funding issues, you end up with processes that seem to multiply the amount of time before you can get to something that everybody agrees the communities need. And that's another whole issue that government is going to have to get a better handle on.
Right. So again, I think that everyone thinks the same thing as far as, again, that the mass transit is something that is an essential item to do, and everyone's like, all right, where's that money coming from to do that? And taking some of the loaf now is better than none of the loaf again for another couple of years, because it's not another couple of years, and be another couple of years, and that's not helpful for any of us, however.
Yeah, and so when the George Washington Bridge was built with the idea that mass transit was going to be incorporated into that, is that coming anytime soon?
Nope.
And I think history has taught us, no matter what you think you will add on to something once it's built, nobody has the will to secure the funding to make it happen. And so if we're going to learn anything from history, if we really believe mass transit is an important part of the economic growth of a corridor, doing half a loaf of bread, you're never going to get more than half a loaf of bread. No one's buying or building the other half.
One of the things that we may consider doing, just because, again, when we keep talking about public-private partnerships and trying to help deal with that, is to bring some of those ideas to the table to identify some of those local sources of funding, whether it's through our business council and the county association and those kind of folks that say, hey, this is something that's essential to be done. But the last time it was a surcharge like that, that was the MTA surcharge, right? So we saw how that kind of, was like, deal with it, so.
I mean, to me, it sums up our new bridge, same 287. And when you drive westbound in the morning, the traffic is here.
Yeah.
The eastbound traffic is tied up in Westchester, so it'll be a nice drive to get onto the traffic jam.
Right.
If you don't do anything about somehow do that.
It already isn't all that bad.
Sir?
Are they building it with the possibility in the future, with the capabilities?
Yes.
To
Yes.
support?
Yes.
Yeah, no, and even what they're proposing to build will actually have on the bridge itself room to put BRT. But the problem is what they scraped out of it is anything else that they would require for BRT or to pay for BRT systems. So there's no consideration given at all. There is literally an extra lane on each side in their plans that could accommodate a BRT system. That's called an emergency lane. But in the absence of a commitment or a requirement to do so, to come up with $1 billion plus, $1 billion or $2 billion, and then to run it, that's the real rub, I think, is that the political system is not going to come up with that money anytime soon. Unfortunately, 2 years would be a miracle if it's not otherwise forced. But.
Yeah.
If you believe that.
All right, other questions? Well, once again, thank you all for who's left. Right, the holdouts, that's what I'm talking about, the ones that stay to the end of the meeting, but thanks again. And thank you so much for reminding us that with the time. Certainly, thanks, George, for hanging out for the county executive and our team here at the board. But thanks again for coming, and have a great afternoon. And we're going to continue the conversation and the process through the committee meetings and communications with all of you. So thank you. Thank you.